For more on this, we are now being joined by Dr. Jack Rouge, who is a research associate at the United Against Nuclear Iran. He's joining us live from New York. Thank you so much for joining us. Is General Lloyd Austin's statements that the attacks on U.S. bases and the injury of soldiers, quote, a dangerous escalation, merely an acknowledgement of the situation in your views, or is it a warning that the U.S. will take action against a specific entity?
Thank you for having me. Unfortunately, I do not perceive Secretary Austin's comments as a warning. These are not the first attacks against U.S. forces that we've seen in recent weeks. U.S. forces have come under rocket fire in Iraq and Syria multiple times. It would seem that the United States is, or the Biden administration, is unable to establish deterrence necessary to prevent further attack by Iranian forces and by Iranian-backed militias. In order to prevent this moving forward, it will take more than just statements or calls for de-escalation. It will take actual kinetic action by the United States in order to reestablish effective deterrence against the regime in Iran and its proxies.
And do you think the United States has become increasingly vulnerable to attacks on its bases across the Middle East, given the heightened threat of retaliation from Iran and its proxies at this time?
So the Biden administration has placed U.S. forces in a position of vulnerability. From the beginning, the Biden administration has sought to toe a more accommodating line with the regime in Iran, including the pursuit of sanctions relief and restoring the JCPOA. As a result, U.S. forces have been vulnerable to attack because it sent the message to Iran that the United States is not willing to use force in response. And so because this deterrence equation is favoring the Islamic Republic, it seems likely that the Islamic Republic has been more willing to use force, which in turn has made the U.S. forces more vulnerable.
And finally, does the Biden administration have any kind of leverage to influence Iran's actions under the current circumstances? We heard Secretary of State Antony Blinken yesterday trying to relay that message through other countries. It's not clear whether or not Iran received it or would even take it into consideration.
So Secretary Blinken has called for de-escalation, and he has sought to mediate or reach some kind of agreement through Jordan in particular. Now, it seems as though the United States is banking on the idea that Iran will be afraid of U.S. response and seek some kind of de-escalatory agreement. Unfortunately, because the United States has not shown a willingness to respond to the regime in a meaningful way, it seems as though there's not much leverage that Blinken can use. And as we've seen with Venezuela recently, calling for sanctions relief or providing some kind of reprieve to these isolated regimes does not lead to meaningful change. I cite the Venezuela example because the U.S. offered sanctions relief in exchange for free and fair elections, and Venezuela in turn held rigged elections and Maduro was still in power. Unfortunately, regimes like Venezuela and Iran respond to strength. They do not respond to accommodation. They do not respond to promises of sanctions relief or de-escalatory agreements such as the one Blinken appears to be offering.
Dr. Jack Rouge, thank you so much for joining us on WION. We're going to be following this story, of course, very closely, a very tense situation in the Middle East as we speak right now, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.